That was probably one of the most brutal scenes I have seen on this show in quite some time. The ending 10 minutes with Marsau and Latisha was so hard to watch. I married couples and couples in general, they have their disagreements and they have these hard moments. And I often think to myself in those moments, you know, I am very much the type of person that's like, I'm not going to say anything that I don't mean. I'm always very careful with my words when even if I'm like, even if somebody pops off on a live, like I'm still in control of myself, right? Still in control of my words that I use because I know that you can't take those things back after you said it, especially if it's on camera, right? And so I always try to remember that. But this moment right here was so raw. You could literally cut the tension with a knife. And I just don't know where I would go from this situation, to be honest with you. I really don't. I just don't know. So I'm gonna come back to that in just 1 second, but I wanted to start this episode off with just letting you know right off the rip that I am extremely bothered watching this scene play out. And I want to know what you guys think. Were you as bothered as I was when you saw this play out? Like, even the lead up to it, I really didn't like it because I just don't know what it was going to solve in any way, shape, or form, or what he was hoping Latisha was going to say to him. And I have a problem with him because he is saying to her that she's not listening, but she literally sat there and listened to him calmly. She never got out of character truly. But the best part to me was when he said, "You're not listening." And she's like, "You've been talking for so long." And he had been at that point. And it was just those little moments where I was kind of like, yes, Tisha, let him know a little bit because I get that the man, I said I was going to come back to it, but I get that the man works. And I think that that's amazing. I think that what he is doing, I truly, as a person, I marvel at the fact that he's able to go out there, build these houses, and do these things. I It is part of the reason why I ended up getting my real estate license because I was watching this show and I'm seeing these people do all of these amazing things in real estate. But at the same time, what I've come to realize about Marceau is that there's a pattern there. And I don't think that he sees it in himself, is that he is turning into his father. And he complained, well, at least from what we can see, there was not really a complaint, but there was an understanding that they didn't really know him that well because he spent so much time working. Now, there are a lot of us out there that can identify with this. I know that I can. My dad, I felt like, worked so much, but so did my mom. My mom, at one point when I was growing up, she was working and going to school at the same time. She was working a night shift and then she was immediately leaving night shift and then taking classes. So I saw both of them work. But at the end of the day, when it came time to like go into my football games and basketball games when I was playing, I was a band geek. So let's just make that clear. It was my mom who was there, but my dad was working. So it's not like I could really complain about him just skipping out on the games because he was actually at work. So when I look at this situation, I look at it from two standpoints. I look at it from the kid who grew up understanding that his dad worked at these interesting, I mean, these second shifts and third shifts. And so it wasn't that he was available for me as I got older, right? So when I think about Love and Marriage Huntsville and I think about the scenes where they went back to Michigan and they were talking with their dad and their dad was reminiscing about how much he missed of their childhood, I think about what Tisha is also trying to tell Marsau is that yes, you're working, you're working, you're working, you're doing all of these things, but at the same time, what what are you leaving for you and your wife? Because your obligation is still to her. Yes, your obligation is to building a life for your family, but your obligation is also to making sure that you spend time nurturing the relationship the same way that you nurture these businesses. Okay? Because at the end of the day, you're building and you're doing all of these things, but it doesn't mean a hill of beans if you don't have time to spend it with the person that you are doing all of these things for. Because at the end of the day, I'm quite sure that while Latisha is, I'm sure, excited about all the work that he's doing and truly benefits from it, I'm sure she's also adding to it as well. But at the end of the day, if the two people who are working so hard get lost in the mix, your marriage has to be the first priority here amongst all of these things that you're doing. And followed by what happens at dinner previously prior to that, I'm already annoyed with him because the Diddy parties of it all. Let's get to it. So this episode is called Soft Hands, Hard Heads. It is the last episode of this season, and it's either episode 9 of season 11 or episode 629. Okay, so just letting y'all know. Okay, I can never tell what number we're actually on. It says Maurice tries to resolve his beef with Martell. The group enjoys their last days in Guntersville. Kimmi shares a shocking revelation about her relationship, and Marsau and Tisha have a very difficult conversation about their future. This episode starts with the continuation of Martell literally going ham, okay, on Maurice for Kimmi bringing up that she had an issue with Martell laughing about Maurice's DUI story, for which we all have said this man needs to never tell that story in that way again. No one is laughing at the actual outcome of him getting concussed. But my thing about this is if you had the accident, if you had the DUI, you had the accident, you hit the animal, the pole, the tree, the partridge and the pear tree, then how is it that you also ended up back at black? When were you concussed? Like, how long did that concussion last? When did you get released from the hospital? Was it between the time period that you got arrested and then you left the hospital and you went to the hospital, then you left the hospital and then went back to black to go party? Because I'm having a hard time understanding now that I think about this timeline. Y'all were pointing that out in the comment section. So now that you open up the floodgates, Maurice, we want to know what the timeline is. When were you in the hospital? How long were you there? You were concussed. When did they release you from the hospital? How long did the effects of the concussion last? Because why are you out back at black afterwards? And or did you go back to black? When did Kimmi come get you? What is the truth? But nonetheless, at the end of the day, Martell does something that I think is, and this is where Kimmi sets the fire, right? And then when Maurice is reacting to Martell, she is like, well, I told you not to invite him. But it's like, girl, you set this. You set this in motion. To be honest with you, you did. You got to recognize that. So now, as you have a hands off approach, you got to realize that, yeah, your hands are back, but they are not necessarily without a bit of ash from this fire that you've just started. So Martell, then, as he is getting worked up, as he typically does, as Miss Nell is trying to calm him down, he tells her to shut the F up. For which she's like, in her confessional, she's looking at her man like, yes, he did say that to me. And sometimes I wish you would be my husband and tell him to, and get him together. And I'm looking like, yeah, bro, get him together. But I think, to be honest with you, I think Chris is afraid of Martell. At the end of the day, it's just been too many times that man has disrespected his wife. And he's just like, well, that's just Martell. Okay, and and I get, yes, Martell was upset and he was in the rage of it all. But that doesn't give him the right to speak to you. That no, that can't happen. That can't happen, Chris. Like I don't know how you manage to do things, and I don't know I mean, but you are never protecting this woman in terms of what Martell is saying to her. And I get that's your boy, but why is your boy should never feel comfortable screaming that at your wife, and I don't care how upset she is. Meanwhile, Destiny is trying to yank him up by his hood. He's screaming at her to get up off of him. What we don't know is that Will later on tells Ken that Destiny was drunk and falling asleep at the table, and she was doing all of that trying to stop Martell because she was drunk. I'm like, now, they camera didn't capture her being drunk and falling asleep at the table, but maybe they was just at dinner too long. But I know how it is, girl. Like, listen, if ain't nothing popping off, or even if it is and it don't involve you, I'm sure she's just sitting there kicking it. Like, let me just have myself a couple of cocktails and let's really get this party going. Somebody, they down there shaking the table, and meanwhile, I'm shaking the drink, and it is stirred and it is chilled, and I like it. Okay, so while she's she's apparently white girl wasted, trying to stop this fight. You know, it Mar Mar Marceau kind of is able to calm Maurice down. And this is what's interesting to me. Maurice is able to Marceau is able to really tell Maurice, hey, you know, that we are Scott men, and we don't react like this. The only person that you are not reacting, well, no, excuse me. Yes, this is true for you, Marceau, with regards to everyone else except for Latisha. Because what we do know is you will react to her, okay, in a way that is a little reminiscent of what Maurice was giving to Martell. Now, Maurice was worked up, but Martell was worked all the way up, okay? So I get that Marceau is like, contemper your reactions. And he tells everybody this. He is almost kind of giving you the Martin Luther King speeches of it all. Like, we're better than this. Latisha, you got to be better. He's always schooling her. But man, the way he was speaking to her tonight, I'm like, I don't think you listening to anything that you be telling her. Or either it's do as I say, not as I do. Clearly. Clearly. So what's happening is you're going off on her and she's going off on everybody else, on all the girls. Okay? That's basically what it is. And you're leaving a trail of tears in your wake every time you dismiss her, you belittle her, and you speak to her in a way that feels to me like you're gaslighting her and patronizing her. When, to be honest with you, I didn't feel like in any way, shape, or form she overreacted to anything that Marceau said to her. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'm gonna take a step back. The argument ends, they all leave. The next day, Martell is telling Chris about the situation, and they got their jokes about the Scots or whatever. He don't want to Martell don't want to hear anything else that Kimmi got to say because he knew that she lit the flame with that last night. And we all know that. And then Will has a sit down ponderosa with Destiny, and he basically tells her, like, you are kind of confrontational because they're recapping the night before. And he's given some observations, and I was like, well, Will is. This is why I mean, some of y'all said that y'all don't like Will for the show. I like him for the show. I like him for the show because he's able to, as an observer, speak what he sees. He is. And later on, he tells Will, he's like, I don't know that I could be with her because she's a girl's girl until she is around the girls. And I'm like, ooh, that's deep. That's real deep. Now, can Destiny be combative? Yes, I think we've seen her be combative in the past. Can she be defensive? Yes, we've seen her be defensive in the past. In these instances with Latisha, I feel like she's more frustrated than anything because I think she feels like she's been walking on eggshells with Latisha, and I think that that's really the case because I do think that Latisha is walking on eggshells with with Marsau, and as a result, those frustrations I do believe come out with Nell and with Destiny with the other women in a way that I just don't think that we see her get with Marsau the same way she will get with these other women, right? And it is what it is. You got to live with. I, I don't want to say what I was about to say because it's gonna sound really negative. But it's like if you got to live with your tormentor, then you might be tormenting other people. Okay, and I hate to say it like that. I don't like the way he speaks to her. That's really where it is. I don't think she deserves that. I think she worships the ground that man walks on, and I think that just the way he treats her is just so. I just can't. I just can't with it. I can't. I absolutely can't. It's hard to watch. It's very, very, very difficult to watch. Um, but yeah, here I am. Okay, so yeah, what does that say about me? I don't know. Glutton for punishment, I guess. Anyway, so then they have a picnic table off. The men make picnic tables together. I guess this is really Maurice's way of working together with Martell to kind of move past their issues, which they really don't even talk about the issues from the night before, which is kind of odd to me. This definitely, while it did not, the ending of the episode gave season finale, but the lead up to it did not. So whatever. They didn't. There's no. To me, there was no real resolve in that, other than the OG men won with putting the picnic table together. But they're all builders, so I mean, it made sense. Meanwhile, the group gets together for the final dinner, and everybody seems like they're at least in a good place. But Ken is a little annoyed because he feels like when they were talking about the spinning of the blocks, that the men were basically trying to get him to be upset, and which we talked about that last week. And I felt the same way. I was like, why are they trying to get him to be upset about something that he's just not upset about? And so then um it comes up that, well, Latisha's like, well, you know what, I want to apologize if it didn't seem like I was on your side because I brought up the DMs with regards to what she had told Trish at the beginning of the season, like way back about, the DMs and people being in Ken's DMs and him being in their DMs and whatnot. She apologizes. And he goes on to say, well, I don't say all of the things that I've heard about Marsau. And she's like, well, I mean, you know, I mean, it is what it is. And then as he goes on to say, well, there's things that I've heard that I could have said. And then she's finally like, well, what have you heard then? I took that as her sort of challenging him, but there was probably still some mild curiosity there. And she's like, and he avoids saying it. And then she says it again. She's like, well, what have you heard? Say what you heard then. And at that point, he's like, well, like at the back room at Black being like the Diddy parties or whatever. And I'm like, now I had never heard this before. I'm like, this must be the rumors going on down to the Huntsville. But I was like, not the baby oil. Lord, no. So not Maurice, Marsau at that point blows the F up at Tisha, okay? He's like, well, what you asking him what's going on for? Why are you begging him to tell you what it is that I'm doing? Why are you doing that? I mean, he goes slam off on her so much to the point that Kimmi has to whisper to Maurice to tell Marsau to stop, okay? And he is going slam off, off on her for asking what it is that Ken knew about him and the Black. I was like, why are you so upset at her? I mean, especially if it's not true. Like, it is what it is. I mean, I just didn't get the reason why he was blowing up so bad at her like that. But what we know is that he was already upset and feeling some type of way based on his last conversation with Maurice and the conversation that they had earlier that day about, well, if you don't, Maurice is basically telling him, like, well, if you don't feel her like she's adding any value to the projects that you guys are working on, because Marsau does not want a business partner. He wants a wife who is basically there to support him and not really work with him because she's very inconsistent with what she chooses to do. Okay. And I think that would probably be a better conversation to have, is maybe having her really make a firm decision on what it is that she actually wants to do in terms of her contributions, and really finding a firm plan to stick to that, versus saying, well, as Maurice suggested, well, why don't you ask her what it would take to buy her out? That's what I did with Kimmi. And she said, of course not. Well, if you think that Kimmi said, of course not, what do you think Latisha's going to say? Especially if she was there from the beginning as he built this business. So it's kind of like, well, I was good enough to help you build it when you had nothing. But now all of a sudden that you got it going on and you got a team, you want to ask me to buy me out? Okay. But that comes later. So as they're at dinner, Martell wants to know what the people's non-negotiables are. Kimmi, what's your non-negotiable? Is it cheating? That's basically what he wants to know. I feel like Martell is still living in this space of maybe regret about the way his marriage ended. But I think what he seems to sometimes forget is that there was a long buildup to the ending of that marriage. And then there was also the matter of a baby. So it's not so Kimmy's response is basically like, I'm more focused on what it's going to take to build up our marriage versus what it would take to break it down. And Marsau agrees. And it seems like he's kind of calmed down from his stance earlier. And I thought to myself, for real, I mean, I I listen, here's the thing. Um in this day and age, I always consider it lucky when people find love in however forms they can find it. Whatever a couple's non negotiables are, that's up to them, and they will likely change over the course of time that they are together. So, if anything, it really is about the commitment that two people make, that they decide that they're going to stay together through thick and thin. And that's just what it's going to be. And you take situations as they come. And that's the only way that you can live, especially because you can't control another person. They cannot control you. You can't control life circumstances, and you just don't know what life is going to bring. That could be financial issues, that can be whatever it is. But if the two people are willing to just simply say, I'm committed to making sure that whatever happens at the end of the day, that we stay together, that is the commitment that they make. And every situation is different. And I don't know that there's going to be anything that any of them say to Martell to really make him feel any better about perhaps the way that his marriage ended. Bottom line. So after dinner, Marsau wants to have this conversation about buying Latisha out, and she listens. But what she hears is this: this sounds like the beginning of the end. You're wanting to buy me out of this, and it sounds like next is this, next is this. Now, versus him saying, well, no, I don't see it that way. And I understand how you could feel that way. But really, what I want to get to the bottom of is that I feel two things. There are two issues that I think he's conflating that I think become a problem. And I hate when people do this in arguments, or I hate when people do this in just disagreements in general. You have two issues. They are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they are not necessarily related. One, you feel alone. So, let's discuss how it is that you could feel a little less alone in this relationship. And it is not just about her level of contributions to the business. Also, you are upset about what it is that you feel like she is or isn't contributing to the business. And your real issue is, it sounds like, number three, that you don't want her to be in the business because you want her to just be the wife that supports you so that you can say, I'm doing all of this for you. Okay. So that puts her in a trick bag at the end of the day, so that you can always say, well, I'm doing all of this for you. I'm doing everything. Because now that I know it, honestly, now that I know how you think about this whole situation, it definitely feels like a trick bag that you're putting her in. Because if she withdraws from all of these activities at any point in time, you have control of everything, and she has to live basically according to your whims and your will, because you feel like you are the leader and the head of the household in such a way that it diminishes her equality in this marriage. Tisha, I'm gonna need you to set some strong boundaries about how you move forward in this marriage. And then he plays this passive aggressive game with her when she is clearly upset about this whole situation. The way he's talking to her, and she's just kind of sitting there taking it. And I'm like, girl, this is why you have so many other issues with some of the women, is because you can't let that anger out, that you need to let it out with your husband. And now is the time for you to let it out, because the tears are streaming down your face and you are about to explode. And now is the time to do so. Because if you don't explode now, you're going to end up taking it out on somebody else that probably doesn't deserve it. And it's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. It's also not fair to him. Because if he is exploding on you and you feel like you need to explode on him, I'm not telling you that you need to give him that same energy, but you need to let him know what he will and what he won't do in terms of how he's going to speak to you or not. So, um, as he's getting up and he's, well, let's go back to the house, babe. She's like, no, I'm not going. I'm like, I don't blame you. No, I would have been like, no, you go back to the place. I'll see you back in Huntsville. So that's how it ends. And then we get into the reunion where it's told to us by Destiny that her belief is that Tisha's issue with her stems from her inability to divorce Marsau, because she reveals to Carlos that she believed that Latisha said to her at some one of their events, well, either I fight with you or I divorce Marsau. Now, I ain't saying that she need to get a divorce, but what I am saying is that they need to find a different way of communicating with each other, particularly the way that he communicates with her. And if he doesn't, it's just going to continue to foster a cycle of what feels like, I won't go that I'm not going to go that far. It just feels like a cycle of emotional manipulation. And I don't know that he knows that he's doing it, but I know that that seems like that, it feels like that's what I'm watching when I watch the show. And I don't want it to come across like I don't ever understand his perspective, because I think that some of his feelings may be valid, but the way that he communicates them and holds things over her head and belittles her, I just don't agree with how he positions his self or his statements. I don't like it, and I don't think it's cool. So anyway, that's my review for Love and Marriage Huntsville. That was the season finale. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section down below, and make sure you guys subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. And make sure you hit that like button, and I'll catch you in the next video.